mentioned earlier, before I actively got involved in this sector of our industry, over a 2-year period, I probably went through a little over half a dozen aerial companies, drone companies. Some would come out on set with smaller, with the Phantoms, which are great, and some would come out with more elaborate octocopters. We were filming in Griffith Park, and it was a car chase scene, and anyone who's ever filmed in Griffith Park, you know it's permitted, and fire safety officers, and we had to have a water truck, and it's no small thing. There was a stunt with a car that had to flip, and it was a big deal. There was a lot of personnel involved, and the directors wanted an aerial shot. So, without naming any names, the company came out, and they seemed great. This was about 2.5 years ago, so this is sort of pre-FAA exemption requirement at this time. And it's the wild, wild west now, but then it was really, really the wild, wild, wild west.
It was Australia.
Yeah, it was like the outback, exactly, in Griffith Park, no less. And, you know, we had this amazing shot all lined up with a bunch of cars on a starting grid, and I was actually first ADing the day, and, you know, we had all the cameras rolling, the ship went up in the sky to number 1 position, everyone was speeding, we were all good to go, we called 3, 2, 1, action, the cars all peeled out, and the shot was supposed to come down. It was supposed to be like a video game, you know, a map, bird's eye view of the racing grid, and then come down along the raceway as the cars go under the camera. And this octocopter, we all heard it as well. It sort of flatlined, it went beep as it was going about 40 knots along the road there, at about 12 feet above the ground level, and it cratered. It went down, it exploded on the street, and cars went over it, and the whole thing was awash. It wasn't pretty. And we swept up the debris and reset and went and did it again, without the aerial. But the answer to your question is, you know, what do you do? You know, what do you do when anything ever goes wrong on one of your sets? You know, you prep and you go through contingency after contingency, and we all have done this enough times to know that, you know, we've probably seen a lot of things go wrong. There have been accidents on set, but we adhere to the safety guidelines. We stick to the permit guidelines. We listen to the FSO on set, and we put our trust in the first AD to make sure that he or she is looking out for the crew and the cast. So what do? You do everything you can to be preemptive. Things will go wrong. You know, the crash rate on these unmanned aircraft is going to be significantly higher than the crash rate on helicopters. The stakes are far lower, of course. You know, a fueled aircraft going down.
Can I interject?
Yeah.
There might be instances too where you have planned destruction to get a certain shot, right?
Well, yes, I think we had a part of Ian's reel earlier had drones exploding all over the place in an Audi commercial, which is brilliant. But look, things will go wrong. And any company who comes out and says, oh no, 100%, you're all good, things go wrong. There's no such thing as 100% airtight, ironclad agreement that nothing's ever going to go wrong. And anyone who's ever worked in production, you guys know that. So it's preemptive, it's communication, it's safety measures, and it's doing it by the book. And I was just about to say, you know, these aircraft will crash, and you only have to go on YouTube and Google drone crash. You'll come up with 100 million videos of people slamming their DJIs, you know, into the sides of apartment buildings or into the ocean or God knows what else. Hopefully not people. So, but the good thing is that, you know, like as was my experience a couple of years ago in Griffith Park, it crashed. We had good lockups. Everyone was squared away. The airspace was clear. Nobody ever goes underneath the drone, ever. That's rule number 1 for any of the companies working in here. You can be diagonally away from an actor or an object, but never, ever, ever directly overhead. That's a deal breaker. And anyone who's doing that, breaking the law. So things will go wrong, Keith, and the idea is to make sure that you're doing this safely and properly and by the book. And then, as was the case in Griffith Park, you sweep it up, sweep it under the rug, and reset and go do the shot again.
See, and now they know to bring an extra drone.
Yeah.
Can I take that one step further?
Yes,
It's absolutely
please.
great.
Yeah.
One thing we haven't talked enough about today, and this is going to be really helpful to you guys, is RF. So we're all used to productions, and you guys sometimes bring in RF people to help signals off of camera cars to be more robust, or helicopter downlinks so the director could see HD signals. You bring in a professional to make sure that those signals are clear. That's an interesting concept, because a drone not just sends down video signal, but its life depends on it. It's up there using RF. Well, that's a pretty dangerous world when you think of it. We can't see what's out there. And the world is full of RF. 5.8, Wi-Fi, cell phones, everything. It's a mess. If we had a scanner in here without everything in this room, it's probably not healthy for us. No, just kidding. But one experience I'll share with you. We just got back from working about a month and a half with Marvel and Disney on their first legal drone shoot with Captain America 3. And it was very successful. We learned a lot of very good lessons, though, and I want to share two things with you about that shoot that I think will help you in future projects. One of them is RF. They were bringing a company, RF Film, to work with some of their ground vehicles and stuff. And we suggested, since we were working in a very densely populated area, one of them being Atlanta and also Puerto Rico, that we use RF Film to scout some of these areas. Obviously, this is an extra cost. And I don't recommend it for smaller projects or even medium projects, but if you have a very high-profile project, you can consider this cheap insurance. This company literally came out with scanners that I can't afford, and basically drew a map of the air and said, well, right there, that's a government building shooting out this much. And if you fly through that, there's a really good chance you're going to get a radio hit. You might lose signal with your drone. It might crash. Right over here, there's a bunch of this. Production's pumping out 5.8. You should shut the Wi-Fi down. All these Prestons right here are on the same frequency as your drone controller. And it may not affect it as in a crash, but what it's doing is it's crushing down those frequencies, and we're going to reduce range. So that company helped us with Marvel with changing frequencies, increasing power, better antennas, shutting off things we knew were dangerous. But the most important thing they did was in Puerto Rico. One of the shots we had to do was a compression shot, flying a 360-degree orbit around a building. Well, that all seemed fine. The building was shut down, streets were closed, ITC was in place. It was amazing. They went down and scouted a couple of days prior with our recommendation. Turned out that building was a repeater for the airport that was about 5 miles away. And it was pumping out RF so strong that it was 100% certain that the drone would have lost link. It was just impossible. It happened to be right in the flight plan. And they were able to draw a picture of it and show it, print it out on a map with the kind of scanners they have. Well, production decided against that, and we used a full-size helicopter. Same aerial crew, but we brought in a helicopter to accomplish that shot. That saved them an insurance claim. It saved them their film permit, saved them a crash, and the FAA and NTSB being involved. And just to send a guy down there on a day contract to do a scout. So there's some extreme importance here in RF, and it's not always required. We don't have to do it for our smaller jobs or if we feel like we're in a safe environment. But if you have something high profile, that technology exists and it will protect you. One last little point that I think is huge for you guys, and this is going to help out immensely. The FAA requires a 100-foot safety zone for our takeoff and landing. That is really annoying on set. It's really hard for location coordinators to put a 100-foot radius safety perimeter on a spot on set. Our sets just aren't that big, and a lot of times you can't even have production personnel in there. You can't have participants in that 100-foot. That's really tough to do. So we back it up to walls, we back it up to mountains. We can be close to those things and have the 100-foot out in front. But keep that in mind. If the FAA shows up on site, they're absolutely going to want to see that, and it's something they'll bust you on. So when you're planning shots, keep in mind that you need to have a safe, secure takeoff area. Unfortunately, that takeoff area, unlike a full-size helicopter, can't be over across the hill where you're not working. It's got to be in a place where the pilot could see it, take off, and fly to the shot. So essentially, that has to move with the shot. You have to move that, and it takes time for the drone company to pick up their cases and everything and move. I'm just trying to warn you to get you ready for the time it takes to reposition and have this here. And before that drone takes off, you got to have a full lockup, meaning nobody can go in there, that 100-foot safety radius. You can walk in there all you want when the drone's just hanging out. But when it's time to lift off, that first AD calls for a lockup. No one could be in there, and no one could be in the flight path unless you have to be for production or for the shot to get the drone over to the shot. So just prepare for that. These drones have technology on it where we program it to go back to that very spot, and that's why that 100-foot rule exists in case there's a lost link. The drone just doesn't fall out of the sky when you lose link. It's programmed to go home to that. If we're going to fly under wires or inside of a building, like Willa said, we'll actually program it to hover in a lost link while we can mess around with our controller and try to get link back. We don't want it to climb and try to go through a building. It can't see that stuff. But that technology is coming, by the way, sensor equipment. So I think those two things are really important. I think it'll help you a lot when you're planning on sets and stuff like that.